I'm Pierre Escobas from Riviera Macro. I'm a biologist. I live on the French Riviera in the south of France, in a very nice place. And I'm your host tonight. We're going to be speaking about macrophotography. This webinar is sponsored by IRIX, the Polish company. I've been collaborating with IRIX for a year and a half now. They were kind enough to loan me this very beautiful 150 millimeter macro lens, which we are going to talk about. And it's a great team. I want to thank them all: Kasia, Piotr, Patricia, Dorian, Mateusz. This great team. I'm enjoying working with them. I'm not paid in any way by IRIX. I'm not sponsored financially by them, so I'm a free man. And this is a webinar that's meant to show you a few of the basics of macro photography. Okay, so I'll be going through a couple of technical points, not much, and then we'll talk about light composition and how to use different lenses for macro. Okay. Many of the images I'll present here have been taken with the lens I just showed you, with the IRIX lens, but many others not, because I'm doing a lot of macro photography and I've been doing macro photo for years and years. So it's not all advertisement for the IRIX lens. So let me start with the slideshow. Any bug is on me. I'm sorry, it's the first time I use OBS. And so you should now see the first slide on the screen. I just want to go through a couple of points. When you want to start doing macrophotography, there's two technical issues that you really must know about. The first one is magnification. In macro, we try to make small things big on our images, and so we use lenses designed to magnify the subjects. As you can see here on the slide, the definition of macrophotography is really when we reach the ratio of 1:1, meaning that the size of an insect, for example, in real life is the same one on the sensor. The sensor full frame is 24 by 36 millimeters. So if a butterfly is 20 millimeters in real life, and then its image is 20 millimeters on the sensor, then we are at a 1:1 ratio. Under that, with less magnification, like on the slide says 1:2, we talk about proxy photography. And above, let's say 5:1, really it's in the realm of ultra macro photography, which I won't be talking about today. So today we're going to talk about macro, and we're going to talk about proxy photography. So proxy photo is when you get images like this. Let's say butterflies, you want to shoot butterflies, dragonflies, large insects, much larger than the sensor, and you're going to be generating images like this. You can go a little bit higher in magnification, and you have images like this. This butterfly is a bit smaller, and I'm showing this because many people talk about macro, and actually they talk about proxy. It doesn't matter aesthetically, it's the same. They're all interesting pictures, but just technically speaking, it's not exactly the same, and the technical problems, the technical issues are actually a bit different. Here's another image in proxy photo, the orchids growing next to my home on the French Riviera. You can see here that I got part of the plant at a ratio of, maybe 1/3 or 1/4 in magnification. Now, when you push the magnification, when you go towards the 1:1 ratio, you get pictures like this. This is a horned mantis from Borneo. So that's about real size because it's a small mantis. And when you can find much larger insects. This is again from Borneo. It's a chafer beetle, which was quite big, where you can start to get really nice portraits at 1:1. Most macro lenses, we'll get back to that in a minute, actually all macro lenses, modern ones, go to 1:1 magnification. And to go beyond that, you need to add devices like close-up lenses, etc. You can go a bit further than one-to-one with the lenses, either by using, as I said, implements like close-up lenses, or using lenses that go to 2-to-1. There's some lenses that go up to 2-to-1. And with the digital images, if you have a large sensor, you can also crop your images, as I did this one. For this one, this is a very tiny beetle here near home, which is about, let's say, 3 to 4 millimeters. So you can see it's high magnification. It's probably 3 times its size in real life. And then you can get also very nice portraits. These are the mantises, the empusa, the horned mantises that we have around here. And this is a portrait also taken at 1-to-1 or more than 1-to-1 ratio. And when you push magnification again, well, you start getting images like this. These very nice spiky beetles live here also. They're numerous in summer. And this is an image that's probably at about 3-to-1 magnification. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact ratios for all the images, but you get the idea that together with the crop, we're close to a ratio of 5-to-1 here. And of course, this requires to be more careful in all sorts of technical issues like lighting and depth of field, which we're going to talk about right after this. But you can get nice images like this. These are the small jumping spiders that crawl on the walls of my kitchen all summer long. And again, these are about maybe 2 millimeters. So Cites barbipes, males, very nice animals. And finally, at 5-to-1, you can get images like this. This is a portrait of a crab spiders that live here also, and they're quite small. And here with a 5-to-1 magnification, I could get really a close-up portrait. Okay, so beyond that, it's in the realm of ultra macro, which necessitates microscope lenses, etc. And that's beyond the scope of this talk today. So that's about it for magnification. The second issue I want to talk about is depth of field. I apologize for those of you who may be doing macro and know about this, but this is an introductory talk. So the depth of field is the range of sharpness in front and in the back of your focus point. You see the top of the diagram shows an image taken with a large aperture. The aperture is the factor that has the most influence on depth of field. It's not the only one. So only the head of the, whatever it is, looks like a sheep, only the head of the animal will be in focus if you use a large aperture. Conversely, if you use a small aperture like f16, f22, you may get the whole scene in focus as shown in the lower part of the diagram. So this is extremely important in macrophotography because the higher the magnification, the smaller the depth of field, meaning that we often talk in like tens of millimeters of focus, for a focus plane, and that makes our life very difficult as macrophotographers. So we have to find ways around that. I'm starting illustrating this by showing you images taken at f16 and f22. These are small QQ wasps that also live here on the French Riviera. They're very tiny, and to get them completely sharp, I need to use apertures of f22, which then requires flash illumination, and we'll get to flash at the end of the talk. And so same situation with this couple of nice beetles mating on a flower. You can see the size of the flower petals. The beetles are maybe 3-4 millimeters. And to get the whole scene in focus, here again I had to use an aperture of f22. Now, often you don't necessitate to have the whole scene in focus. You may want to have a bit of fuzzy background. Sorry, this is again another example of the bee pollinating the dandelions near my home. And again, I use an f22 aperture, and you can see the flash being reflected in the eye of the bee. Now, sometimes you don't want, for various reasons, to have the whole scene in focus. I'm going to show you two images to illustrate that. When I'm chasing butterflies, I often try not to actually have the whole scene in focus because it's more pleasing aesthetically. So the first image was taken at an aperture of maybe f11. So I wanted to have the butterfly and the whole plane of the wings in focus. And so you can see it's the case. And you can see the background is not exactly completely blurred. And I also see the flower under the butterfly. So it was a choice. This is more of a semi-naturalist picture, but with the same butterfly or its brother or sister. When I wanted to get a more aesthetic image, then I opened up to 2.8 or 4f4, and then it results in an image like this where you can see the background, it's much more blurred, and only the eyes of the butterfly are in focus, which gives you a different kind of image. It's more aesthetic, and my point is also that it's not always necessary to have absolute sharpness on the whole of your image. You may want, for aesthetic reasons, to have part of your image not in focus. So you really have to understand how aperture and the focal length of your macro lens will affect the depth of field and the resulting effect. This is another example where I decided to open up to get only the front part of the orchid in focus while I had the background blurred and the back part of the orchid blurred. And it turned out that I was photobombed by a small fly, which is also in focus. But I think the image is aesthetically better than if I had chosen an f16 aperture and got the whole flower in focus. Mastering depth of field is important for one reason. You often, with larger subjects, you want to isolate them from your background. And so you have to understand how your lens will separate your subject from the background. It depends on your focal length. A lens that is 100 millimeter or 150 or 200 millimeters will not separate the subject in the same way. The plane of focus will be more narrow with a longer lens. So here, for example, with these wild orchids, I want to separate them from the grass behind, and so I use a larger aperture so I could get my flower really detached on the blurry background. This is actually done with the IRIX lens. These images here are all done with the 150 IRIX lens. You can tell how sharp the lens is and also how beautifully it renders the background. This is another case where I wanted this praying mantis sharp, of course, but I also wanted to see some of the background because there were lights filtering through the branches behind, and it gave really a beautiful bokeh. I didn't want to blur it completely, so I chose an aperture which was intermediate. And actually, in a case like this, I will always do a series of images. And so then I can sort them and choose the one that I like the most. But I probably went from f2.8 to f8 on this one, and then chose the one that would give me the best effect. At 2.8, my praying mantis wouldn't be in focus completely anyway. So I really like the effect I got with this one. And that's the similar image to the one shown before. I wanted to get the flares in the back, they're white flowers, but I wanted them to be not in focus. I just wanted the flares. And so I use a large aperture again with this wild orchid. So my background is semi-blurred, but I wanted to have this flare effect showing on the picture. And then using a lens like the IRIX, which has a focal length of 150 millimeters, therefore a very short depth of field, you can try and be very creative. I took this picture very recently, a few days ago, on a beautiful morning. Everything was covered with dew, and I opened completely so I could get only the small spider in focus, and I wanted the rest to be blurred. And you can see the flares are due to the drops of dew on the web, and only the spider is in focus. And that's exactly the effect I wanted to get with this image. Similarly, on the same day, I managed this image of a large dragonfly, This is a bit later in the morning. The flares are due to the reflection of the sun on the surface of the water. So I got lucky. The dragonfly stayed with me for a few seconds. And if you look at the image, I don't know if it shows big enough on your screens, but actually the head is not in focus, which is not great. Normally the eyes should be in focus. But because I used a very large aperture to get this aesthetic effect, you can see that the plane of focus is limited to the base of the wings and the front part of the abdomen. The back of the abdomen and the head are both slightly out of the focus zone. But I did that on purpose. So again, my conclusion is know your lens, know how playing with the aperture will affect your images and will affect your depth of field. Very important concept. And again, you can be extremely creative at high magnification. This is the heart of an iris flower. And I've tried this year to do a series of images like this, playing to get just a tiny part of my image in focus, well, to try and do something more artistic, if possible. Just playing. Now, second part of the talk, I want to talk about how to choose a lens for macrophotography. I want to show you, I'm going to switch, to myself. If I can transition, yes. I should have switched to myself now. I want to show you a few of the lenses I'm using. I've been doing macro for a very long time. I have a collection of lenses. My message is different purpose, different lens. Depending on the type of image you want to generate, you're going to have maybe a different lens. I use this one. It's a very old Nikon 50mm, extremely sharp, very good, because I do images on white background as part of the Meet Your Neighbors project. And for that, it's studio work, and I need my subject to be completely in focus. So I have more depth of field with a shorter focal length. This is not good to hunt dragonflies in the field, but it's great for studio work. And I'm going to show you examples right after that. For many, many years, I've been using this one. This is an old favorite. It's the Nikkor 105 lens. It's fantastic. Now it's getting a bit old, not as sharp as the modern lenses, but it served me very well for many, many years. And 100mm is really I would say, the sweet spot for focal length, because this is very versatile. You can do a lot of things with 100mm. Of course, now I've been using for a year and a half this beautiful lens from IRIX, the 150, and this has been particularly well suited to doing proxy photo, more than true macro at 1:1. It can do, but I like it for doing really images where I need a bit less magnification. I also use it for video work, macro video, which I'm not going to talk about tonight. And then you can also use, it's very heavy, it's like a paperweight. You can use longer lenses. I've had this Sigma 180 for quite a while. As you can see, it's much bigger, and believe me, it's very heavy. It's very heavy to carry in the field too. It's fantastic in terms of image quality, but it's more difficult to use. But for shy subjects and to get really a very narrow depth of field, this is an absolutely fantastic lens too. But it's too heavy. It's too heavy now. I don't use it so much. So let me show you some images, some examples. So again, I hope it switched. I don't see on live. I don't see. I have a lag with the other screen. I answer the question as they come. No, the Nikon doesn't come with the color. I bought the color after many years looking for one. I bought the color from eBay. It's from a company called iShoot, ISHOOT, and they make one that fits the Nikon. Nikon doesn't make a color for this lens. So the Meet Your Neighbors images are, if you don't know them, they're white background images illustrating biodiversity. I'm a contributor to the project, and these are images taken with the 50mm. That's in Borneo. I'm going to show you an image from French Guiana. So you see I need a lot of depth of field for these subjects, and so the 50 is great, and I have the subjects in the studio, so they in general they don't escape, so that's fine. Then, as I said, the 100mm has been my working lens for many years. I went to many trips in the rainforest with me, and I got nice images like this one, the tiger beetle from Borneo, images like this, again from Borneo, jumping spider at night, beautiful animals. You can see the depth of field is not enough to cover the front part, the pedipalps in front of the spider, so you're starting to see the effect of the increasing focal length. And it's good also for larger subject, again from Borneo, frogs image at night in the rainforest. So this lens has been fantastic. I also use it with additional close-up lenses like Raynox, so I could get nice portraits. This is the biggest carabid beetle in the world. It's from the mountains of Montenegro, and you can see the lens gave me a beautiful sharpness. So I'm very happy. I was very happy for many years with this one. I now use another lens. Now, if I want to image larger subjects and isolate them from the background, I'll use a longer focal length. This image was done with the IRIX. It's a lilium from the mountains around here, and as you can see, I wanted to separate them, and I managed beautifully with the longer focal length. If I was using the 100 or the 50, I would see the rocks sharp. We'd see a sharper image of the rocks in the background. This also is taken with the IRIX lens against the sun. A bee here nearby pollinating the what's called the butterfly lavenders, and you can see the lens is beautifully sharp and the background is nicely rendered. And in this case, when the background is quite far, you can actually close down a bit. You can take images at f8 or even f11. If the background is very far, you still have a nice blurred background with the lens like this. This is one of my favorite images taken in the past year and a half since I've had the IRIX. This was a morning by the pond nearby in the mountains, and this is a dragonfly awaiting for the sun to warm up a bit and take off. And I just love this image because the background became completely blurred. Of course, the background is pretty far away in this case, but you can see how smooth it is. And the dragonflies, it's really completely sharp. So that's one of my best images with the IRIX lens. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the next slideshow. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, so now I want to talk a bit about finding. I'm still want to say a couple of things about the background. Managing your background is important, and you need to find the right angle also. When I took this image also with the IRIX lens, I wanted to see the flares with the yellow flowers in the background, and therefore I turned around my subject and I put I managed to get the animals far away enough from the background that they became very blurred. So in such an instance, you may want to experiment with different apertures until you get the effect that you want. Same here, dragonfly landing at the pond. This image was actually taken with the longer lens. I think it's the 180 in this case, because the animals are very shy. And again, I could use an aperture of f8 or f11 because my background was very far, and still my dragonfly is completely in focus. So it's not a problem. You will hear that having a blurred background is always linked to having a wide aperture. Well, it's true, but not completely. It also depends on about the distance between your subject and the background. If your subject is in the grass, of course, f11, you will see the grass. But if your subject is like this, perched above a pond, well, the water is maybe 2, 3, 4 meters away, and it's blurred anyway, even if you shoot at f11. And of course, If you want to image dangerous subjects like this one, you may want to use an even longer focal length. I'm using on a regular basis a 300 millimeter lens, which is not a macro lens. It's the Nikon 300 f4. I use it in general with an extension ring, and I can blur the background behind the very large subjects like this pit viper from Borneo, because I have a longer focal length in this case. So that's also another way of getting this type of image. And of course, the pit vipers, you don't want to get too close. And believe me, I was at least 20 centimeters away from this animal. Okay. I just look at the questions. All right, so everything seems to be proceeding okay. Let's have a word about finding the subjects. This is a question I'm asked many times. How do I find my subjects? There's different answers to that. First of all, you need to know the locations, and then you need to know the period. This is an example of a place near where I live. It's a wet prairie where hundreds of orchids will bloom in the spring, but maybe for only 2 weeks. So you have to know the spot, and you have to know when the orchids will bloom. So you have to be familiar with your environment. So I went there at the right time, and I managed to get those beautiful images of the orchids with the flares in the background. Okay, so that's what I had in mind this year, and this is also done with the IRIX Lens. And another image, there was water in the prairie, it's very wet, and so I wanted to get flares. So I went there at the peak of the flowering time, and I managed to get the images I wanted. So because I knew the good time and location. This is another location where I go a lot to find specific subjects. This is a karst plateau near home. This is the observatory actually of the University of Nice, and you can see it's a very dry place, lots of rocks, and it harbors a lot of life. There's a little pond there where I go at the end of June until the end of July, which is filled with dragonflies. So this is a picture done recently at sunrise. I wanted to get some pictures of dragonflies covered with dew. I was lucky, the weather was good, and I managed to find the subjects I wanted to image. But because I knew exactly that at this place at 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning, I would find the dragonflies, and they would be due at this time of the year. This is another image just done a few days ago. And again, I went there at sunrise. This image was taken, it was about 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I managed to find these dragonflies sleeping by the pond, covered with dew. And the time frame is actually very small, because after half an hour, the dew is gone and the dragonfly is gone too. So you really have to know your locations. Same with these owl flies. We have a number of places around here where there's large populations of owl flies, and you can catch them in the morning light like this before they fly too much, if you know where to go and exactly and the time to go. So again, this was done just after sunrise in a place I know in the area. So it's very important to understand this. Even more important when it's rare species. Europeans probably know this. This is one of the famous longhorn beetles in Europe. It's called Rosalia alpina, and it's probably one of our most beautiful beetles in Europe. And the time window to find them is maybe 4 weeks in summer, between July 14 and August 15, and only in the morning when the sun is shining, and only in old growth beech forest. So that's a lot of onlys. And here, there's only 2 forests like this that I know of, where we have very, very old beech trees. And it requires a good hike in the mountains. And If you're lucky, they'll be there, but if you're not, they'll disappear. If there's a cloud in the sky, just one cloud hiding the sun, they will go away, they will hide. So I got lucky one or two or twice, I managed to find them. But just to tell you that you have to have very, very precise knowledge of the biology and the locations. Exactly the same for these ladybird male spiders, which show up in summer. They're not so rare, but it can be very, very difficult to find them because they're very tiny. It took me 2 days of hiking on the Kars Plateau, about 12 hours in total, to find just one last year. So, you know, it can be difficult. Although I know they're there, they're very hard to find. You also want to work with biologists, people who are knowledgeable. This is an image taken last year with my friend Frank Cannon. He's Frank Deschandeau. He's known as Frank Cannon on the web. He's very famous. And we were after the cuckoo wasps. And Frank educated me in the ways of finding cuckoo wasps, which are tiny, and you have to really to look for them. And we managed to get these beautiful pictures, but only after he showed me how to find and capture them. Another picture here of another species. We found eventually many species, and now I can find them by myself, but because I was shown. Exactly the same situation with my friend Bernard van Leghem. I don't know if he's online today, but he's well known also on Facebook. He's a great photographer, and he's a great biologist from the Belgium. Sorry. And Bernard showed me, he came to my place and we went hunting for bugs, and he showed me how to find this beautiful Antaxia by beating the bushes and the trees. And we found this, which is definitely one of the best looking beetles in the area. It's a small weevil, and it's very bright in color, and we found it by beating the bushes. So again, working with knowledgeable biologists, you will find many more subjects than if you just go look by yourself. And I am a biologist. And it's even more true if you're in the tropics. You really have to go for it. And these are pictures taken in Borneo. And I'm here imaging dragonflies in a small stream in the middle of the rainforest. And you have to go with the people, the local people, because they know where to find the animals. We were, for example, looking for the violin beetles, which are very famous flat beetles, which are very difficult to find. They live only on certain fungi in the rainforest, and you can walk for days without finding one. But if you know exactly where to look, you can find them. So you have to rely on the local people. And again, in this case, we found them and got the pictures. And of course, we also use different ways of attracting insects with the night lights when we're in the rainforest. So that's another way of finding subjects. But most of the time, it's good fun wading in little streams and trying to catch dragonflies, insects, and also lots of nice night walks to find things. Good memories. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the next. Next one. Okay. I want to talk a bit about bokeh. We talked about subject isolation and backgrounds. Sorry, I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions. Do you use flash? Yes. I will get to flash a bit later in my slides. I use flash when I need it for high magnification. Okay, the image on your screen right now, for example, is taken in natural light. I'll get back to that in a minute. Do I normally use a tripod? No, I like to go handheld. Why? Because I like to chase my subjects and they will not stay put. So most of the time I don't use a tripod. I use a tripod only if I do stacks of images. So a series of images like the dragonfly covered with dew, because the animal is completely still. So then in that case, I can take 15-20 images and without the animal moving, and then I can stack them in the software. So yes, in that case, you need the tripod. And the other case now where you use a tripod is for macrovideography. because the slightest shake and your clips are just not good. But in general, no, I go handheld, and I even stack handheld sometimes. So let's talk about bokeh. Bokeh is the Japanese word designating the background, and in general it means that either your background is completely blurred or that you have some flares, as you can see on this picture. So how do you get nice bokeh? Well, the first tip is use a long lens. Okay, use 150 millimeters, use a longer lens. You can get nice bokeh because you will isolate your subject. The second thing is, what I like to do personally is get flares. Like on this image, I wanted to get the flares from reflection of the sun in the river, and I purposely shoot against the sun to get these beautiful flares. It was the case like this at the same pond side, and these spiders will show in July, and they're just by the water side, and in the morning the rising sun shines through them, and it gives very, very nice light. And you can see the background is completely blurred because I used the IRIX 150, but I got a very nice light, and this is shot against the light. Okay, you may not shoot completely directly against the sun, but you have to shoot in the direction of the light. Here's another example. Again, a dragonfly by the pond in the morning. You can see the flares on the left of the image. This was shot with the dragonfly, with the sun in the back, shining through the grasses. It's actually quite a perilous position. I was half sitting in the water because this guy was hiding in a ditch. So it's good memory though. I'll show you an example of what it means to generate bokeh purposely. I was called one day by people I know in the local park. They found this huge hawk moth caterpillar, and they wanted to show me, and they wanted me to take pictures. So I went. We set up the little studio. You can see the branch on the left on the tripod, and there's this enormous caterpillar about this size, the size of one of my fingers. And I gave the IRIX lens to one of my fellow photographer friends, so she could take pictures. But that's the setup. And we turned around the subject, and we turned the subject to get different effects. I'm going to show you two pictures. This is natural light, and I had some red leaves in the background, and you can see they gave me this beautiful red background, all blurry, with the IRIX lens, and just because we decided to shoot against those leaves. But then we turned the subject and we decided to take another type of image, and this is just the flowers, the flower bushes in the distance in the back. Okay, so my point is, your background can change dramatically if you just move a little around your subject. Sometimes two images will be very, very different if you just slide by a few centimeters to your left or to your right, and the light will be completely different. So do not hesitate to move around your subject and look at the light in the background and look at the effect before depressing the shutter, so you can get different type of images. This was, for example, one of those cases. This is actually a double exposure. I shot the background and the animal in slightly different positions because the animal was on a branch. This is a larvae of Empusa, but she was not sitting exactly in the axis of light. So in this case, I took the first image of the animal to get the silhouette, and then I slightly changed my angle and did a double exposure with the light filtering through the leaves in the background, so I could get exactly what I wanted. So that's a little trick. You can easily do double exposures with most modern cameras. It's not complicated. And this, in effect, this is an image I got just a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago only. It's again at the same pond. It's a Zygaena, a butterfly emerging, and it just spread its wings. And this is a time when the sun was a bit higher up in the sky. It's maybe at 10 in the morning. And these are the flares provoked by the reflection of the sun on the water. So that's another point. You may want to wait when you're on a site like this, because at sunrise and then 1 or 2 hours later, you can get different types of images because the light reflections will be different. Watch your eyes in a case like this, because the sun might shine through the viewfinder and it may damage your eyes. But if you get the angle right, you can get these very, very nice flares by aiming at the reflections in the background. And again, this I took maybe 10 or 20 images, and I picked up the one I like the most after, because, you know, moving a bit around the subject changes the image. Now, because we're talking about the light, I want to say a couple of things about lighting. You can see here a rig I use for video, and I'm going to try to transition to myself again, all right, to show you a couple of implements. I've started recently using LED lights for my macrophotography. Okay, these are very cheap ones. This is Godok 64. They cost almost nothing, and they're very, very powerful, and they're very good to give a bit of light to your subjects. When, for example, you shoot against the sun, your subject will be dark, and the front of your subject, you want to bring back a bit of light. A LED light is a good way. You can use a flash, but the LED light is easier because you see what you're doing. So you can use these. They're very cheap, very light to carry in the field. I've started using these small ones also, the cube lights. This is Ulanzi one, cheap one. There are more expensive ones. They also can give you a bit of lighting. What I like to use also very much, and more than anything actually, is simply this. This is simply a piece of board, a cardboard, where I glued some crushed aluminum foil. Okay, very simple. It costs absolutely nothing, and this is a very good reflector in the field. Aluminum, the crushed foil is better than simply the foil. It gives you a very nice soft light. Some of the images you have seen, like the orchids, were done with this. Okay, so to bring back a bit of field light. And when I shoot in midday and the light is very harsh, I also use this. This is simply a sheet of packing foam, very thin foam, in an office folder, and I use that to control the amount of light hitting my subject to avoid the reflections and to avoid the harsh light. I can get very beautiful light even in midday sun just by using this. I've done videos on my YouTube channel explaining this, so I'm not going further into this. Okay, let's go back to our slides. All right. So this is an example done with the IRIX lens recently. The light was good overall, but I wanted it to shine in the back because I want the outline of the hair showing on the moth. And then I had to bring back some light, and this is done with the LED light, simply. So in this case, I was on a tripod to answer the question because I have only two hands. And so one hand to shoot with the camera and one hand to hold the LED light. But it shows you that you can really bring a lot of light on the front. Otherwise, the animal would be completely dark because the sun was in the back. Same here. I like to shoot butterflies against the sun in the morning because you get this very beautiful outline of the wings, the low light in the morning will delineate the hairs on the wings. But you need if you don't want just to have a silhouette, you need to bring back a bit of light. And here again, I used a LED light to shine on the butterfly before it flew away. It wasn't. I'm not saying it's always easy because it's one person, handheld, and having the camera on one hand, the reflector on the other hand. But it works sometimes. And of course, with static subjects like these orchids, these are Spiranthes orchids, which are very nice at very high magnification. And sorry for the crop, it's because of the OBS setup. And here I shown the LED light in the background. Okay, I wanted to really have a black background, and so I set up my camera to see only the front of the subject. I had one LED in the front and one LED in the back, and you see how the back LED outlines the hair on the orchid. So this is a stack. Of course, it's high magnification. Let's talk a bit about flash. Here I'm with my friend Bernard also, and look at this setup. We're using flash because to answer the question that Jean-Benoit was asking on the chat, we are working on high magnification. These were shooting the Antaxia, which are 3 millimeters. I'm holding a flower in my right hand with the tiny beetles, and Bernard is, as you can see, shooting with his flash. We wanted to avoid also the reflections, the specular lights, because of the sun shining on the beetles. So I'm holding the white umbrella to filter the light from the sun, so we get a nice even light, no specular lights, no reflections, and then Bernard could lead the scene exclusively with a flash and control exactly what he was doing. So that's a bit, of course, more complicated setup, but the point is, you always, for the best images, want really to have control of your light as much as possible. And so that's one of the resulting images. This is not Bernard's one, it's mine. I use a reflector, I use flash, and I use a diffuser. Sorry, not a reflector. I use a diffuser to get a nice even light. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to switch back to myself. All right, so there's no time to discuss diffusion in detail, but basically what I use are concave diffusers like this. This part has a reflector built in. It goes on the top of the flash, and I have 2 layers of diffusions, which are basically foam that go over my flash. One here and one here. So the combination of these 2 layers give me a very nice even light. And I wanted to show you the flashes I'm using. My message is you don't need necessarily to invest a lot of money. The small Chinese flashes, which are cheap, are extremely good. All my macro work, all the images you've seen at high magnification, all the images from Borneo have been done with this single flash. It's a maker. It's extremely good. It's cheap. It's been with me to the jungle, etc. Rained upon, in horrible conditions. It's still working perfectly well. I like it. I like it because it's a low profile flash, and it doesn't get in the way. And it's not a huge flash. It works perfectly well. It's enough. And I use a second one often for backlighting. I'm going to show you some images after. And this is also an even cheaper Chinese flash. I use it in manual mode. Costs almost nothing, maybe 30 euros. So you can use. I have also plenty of Nikon flashes, expensive ones. I don't like to take them in the jungle with me. They're heavy, they're big, and I like the small ones. And you get the images that I've shown you. If I've switched now, this is taken exactly with this setup. This also the chafer beetle from here around the area. You can see the light is well controlled with the diffuser. It's also taken with the small flashes. So you don't need a lot of equipment. You just need to know what you're doing with the flash. Okay, I'm switching to my last part of my talk. Okay, I want to show you a few images done in the jungle. So this is about lighting with flash. When we go to the rainforests in Borneo and French Guiana, we look for subjects at night because that's when all the bugs come out, and you can find extraordinary life forms. And the flash is necessary because this is shot at 1:1 or even more, and there's just no light at all. You're in the rainforest. It's pitch black dark, and you don't see anything. So you need to have flash because you're shooting at f/22 too. And so in this case, the wax filaments of this insect, this homopteran larva, really shine. They show rainbow colors with a flash illumination. You often get that with wings or some features of the insects. The flash is necessary for big subjects too, and even a small flash like I'm using is enough to light frogs beautifully. You just have to open up a bit, and this is all done in TTL mode. I don't worry about being manual in these cases. It's automatic and it works very, very well. And it's also all diffused with a concave diffuser. And I showed you I'm using two secondary small flash here. This is a technique I learned from my friends in Singapore, and it's called backlighting. It can be done during the day, but of course at night it's even more spectacular. So the second flash is triggered by the first one. It's in slave mode, and if you get the angle right, you get pictures like this where you have beautiful backlight. This is a small tarantula perched on a piece of wood. This was taken in Borneo too. This is called a leaf grasshopper, and as you can see, it's shaped like a leaf also in Borneo. And if getting backlighting it shows really the shape and the thin cuticle of the insect that serves as a camouflage. Getting the angle right is not always easy, but when it works, it's nice. And it's probably I think it's my last slide. Of course, dragonflies perched in the rainforest at night are perfect subjects for backlighting. You can see here where the light comes from. There's a bit of front light, and most of the light comes from the back and really shines through the wings, and you can see the colors of the wings with the flash. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say. We're about 45 minutes now. It's time for me to wrap up the talk. I'm having a look at the chat. What type of metering I use? Let me find. Sorry, the term. It's not spot. It's what is it called? The name in English. It's not spot. It's the next one. Sorry, it's not matrix metering. I find it more precise to use spot-centered metering, but in general it doesn't make a lot of difference. And also I control my light, as you have seen, either with a flash or with using diffusers and reflectors. So in the end it doesn't make a lot of difference, but you may want to try different settings and see how it affects your images. I don't worry much about that. For natural light, I try to use anywhere from 100 to 400 ISO, and for images with the flash, I start at ISO 400 as a base, and put my flash in TTL. If it's not enough, I either open up a bit or push the ISO. With the modern cameras now, you don't have much noise, up to maybe 3200. I try to keep my ISO low to avoid the noise on the images. I think, yeah, I don't think it's average. It's, sorry, I'm tired. I can't remember the term. It's the measurements done on the spot and in the area immediately next to the spot. This is, of course, a talk organized by IRIX, so they asked me to let you know that if you have registered for the talk, you may get a special discount on their lens, the 150 macro, which again is an absolutely a fantastic lens. It may not be easy to use for true beginners. I've done a full review, which you can see on my YouTube. So please have a look at the review where I explain how I use the lens and the pros and cons. It's definitely a great lens. I'm in love with it, and I hope they don't ask for it anytime soon, because I'm planning to do a lot more work with this lens. Okay, so this was my first online session. I've given a lot of talks in my life, but never online. So I've enjoyed the experience. Thank you, the 29 viewers. Thanks a lot for being patient with the glitch at the beginning and for staying up to the end. And if you have questions, I can stay here a few more minutes for the chat. You can reach me on Facebook, you can reach me on Instagram, you can reach me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, etc. So it's very easy. If you have more questions, feel free, I will answer the questions. You can pay a visit to my YouTube also. There's a few tutorials already online. I'm reading the chat now. Extension tubes. Okay, I don't use extension tubes with the 100mm lens because they're cumbersome. I need to remove the lens, put the tube, see whether it's okay. I don't like to do that, especially when I shoot in the rainforest. You lose a bit of sharpness because there's a bit of diffraction within the tubes, so you lose a tiny bit of sharpness. Overall, it's just not so convenient. I use a lot the Raynox close-up lenses, which I clip or screw in front of my lens. The Raynox gives you, depending on the model, 1.5 times or 2.5 times increased magnification. And the Raynox are absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. Get one if you want to go to above 1:1. You can leave it on your lens even all the time, and you don't see any difference in sharpness. It's an amazing piece of kit. They're not so cheap, but it's worth the investment if you want to go above 1:1. The only case now where I use extension rings is with my 300mm lens. The minimum focusing distance is about 1.5 meters, so the ratio is maybe somewhere around 1/3. So it's not enough for smaller insects. So I'll stick one extension ring, 36mm, the biggest one of the three, behind the 300, and then it's a killer tool for shy insects, butterflies, and dragonflies, etc. Highly recommended to do that if you have a long lens. Thank you for all the thanks. Okay, all right. Okay, my YouTube channel is Riviera Macro. I'll type my name. I'll type my name on the chat. Okay, if you type this on YouTube, you will find me. I'm Pierre Escobas on Facebook, and I'm Riviera Macro on Instagram too. And again, just drop me a message anywhere, and I'll guide you. There's not that much on the YouTube yet, but I'm working on different tutorials. If you have any, ideas or requests or things you'd like me to do in tutorials, let me know, and I can film that. All right, so we call it an evening. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, people from Europe, and thanks to the Canadians for attending. It's a pleasure to be heard on other parts of the world. Okay, bye-bye. Good hunting.